Hello everyone, my name is Maciej Nowak and welcome to the Osom to Know podcast where we discuss all things related to building your website. And this episode is special because I have a special guest. Welcome Adam Robinson, founder of Retention.com, which makes roughly $20 million in annual recurring revenue. And I have to say I have failed miserably. We were supposed to talk about cart abandonment for your e-commerce, and we took a 1 hour deep dive into building your brand on LinkedIn. And I'm not unhappy about it. So without further ado, jump with me into a fascinating story how Adam was figuring out his style, which now captivates his business audience. If you don't want to miss new episodes and keep learning, subscribe to Osom to Know newsletter at osomstudio.com/newsletter. This is osomstudio.com/newsletter. If you watch this on YouTube, give us a thumb and subscribe to the channel. This means a word to us. Without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Adam Robinson.
Hey everyone, it's good to have you here. We're glad you decided to tune in for this episode of the Osom to Know podcast.
Hello, Adam. Thank you very much for joining the pod.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I would like to talk about a couple of things. Let's say there are two things. So one, a little bit of a history on Retention.com. How did it happen? And then I would love to do a deep dive into cart abandonment, so that our listeners can learn a bit about some hands-on, let's say, stuff too. But before that, I would love to ask you this question, because when I go to your profile, it seems like, on LinkedIn or wherever, it seems like you're a one-man media company. Can you tell me a little bit more about this?
First of all, I'm definitely not a one-man media company. I have a lot of people that are making this media possible.
It's like what. It's like overnight success. Have 10 years in brewing, right? In preparation.
Yeah, exactly. So what this is all about, this media, whatever, is like a year and a half ago, and this sort of is intertwined with the history of our company. A year and a half ago, we thought that the biggest Shopify stores were our ideal customer profile, and the penetration of products like ours into that market was like low single digits %. None of them were using anything like it, basically. And I was like, okay, this is an awareness problem. And like, what is the quickest way to spread awareness in the world today? And I think if you're willing, it's by building up a personal social media profile. Everybody's on social media nonstop, but you're on social media to connect with people, not to connect with brands. So if the idea were to build up the retention.com page, like, I don't think it would have done it as effectively as sort of me. And then, the journey has been interesting. Like right now, I'm actually not even focused on what we're talking about anymore. We're currently in the process of launching a product with a similar technology that instead of selling to Shopify stores, it sells to B2B companies like, software as a service and like, whoever, security and healthcare and all that stuff. And it's like the media definitely spread awareness on the ecom side in the ecosystem in a really powerful and compelling way. So much so that I would recommend that anybody do it. LinkedIn, especially, like if you're a CEO and you're selling B2B, get a ghostwriter, have somebody start posting for you. See if you can, there's a guy who's also in the Shopify ecosystem called Stuart Cheney. He's got a company called Revo and a bunch of other Shopify apps. And he asked me, he's like, I'm kind of willing to do this work in public stuff like you. I think I have an awareness problem. Do you think I should post on LinkedIn? And I was like, yes, like it may not be quite as compelling as the stuff I'm writing from a work in public perspective, but like, I just found that even on the ecom side, it was doing things, you ask Stuart, you're like, what's it doing for you? He's like, I'm not exactly sure, but I know it's doing something very powerful. just like making people aware of who you are. And then, now that I've been writing content. So I was writing content trying to attract this e-commerce ecosystem until Labor Day of last year. Then switched it entirely to aim at revenue leaders at software companies. And then all of a sudden, my experience became so much more resonant. Does that make sense? Because like the whole time that I was doing it for ecom people, I was like, I was really I was talking a ton about my own business, because there's problems that you and I share with any other, with somebody who's running a corner store. We all share the same. Or fucking employee sucks. Like people are whatever, right? Like, but beyond that, I don't have much to say to an ecom, to a Shopify founder. Like nothing. My day is like totally different, and like the problems within my business beyond people problems, and just very basic sort of like fundamental, like, well, here's my, make great products, right? Like have great product market fit. Like, but beyond that, it's just a totally different world, right? Like, and like, I'm not going to be able to put out stuff like Nick Sharma is sitting there making landing pages all day. Like, of course he's going to be able to like write content from a place where it's more resonant than me, to Shopify owners or whatever. So around Labor Day last year, I started writing about my experience aimed at sales, marketing, founders, like whatever, of software companies. And it was just unbelievable what happened. Like, those people are living on LinkedIn, whereas like, I don't think the Shopify founders are. They're more on Twitter, but like the ecosystem people on Shopify, like agencies, vendors, like it's really important that they know you too. So I think that's why it's worth it basically to start posting on LinkedIn. But like, man, on the B2B side, it like really like it generates calls and, signups for our product. We have a freemium product. So it actually generates ICP, ideal customer profile business, like unbelievably well. In the, so there's just a lot of interesting lessons. I don't know how you look. If you're selling into ecom and you're not an ecom person, I think you'll always struggle with this problem. It's like, well, how, I didn't know how, I was contemplating solving it by like getting somebody else to do a podcast with me or something who like was kind of like a $1 million Shopify founder or something like that, who like was also a creator or something like that. But yeah, it's just an interesting deal. Now, we're doing a lot. I'm sorry about that. We're doing a lot with video. I have a team of, I guess I have, I'm doing a lot on LinkedIn and then putting a lot of video on LinkedIn. So like I have a LinkedIn consultant that basically helps me with topic selection, kind of concocting the hook, like what the post should be, and then he edits it and makes it perfect or whatever. Then we have people that what comes back from those posts is so prolific in terms of inbound connections and DMs and stuff. We actually have people like managing our inbox and turning that activity into whatever we want, either calls or, DM me to get on a wait list for something or like or whatever. And then we have 2 full-time video people, like sort of the strategist and director, and then we have a video producer and a couple outsourced editors. But that's not only for me. That's like we're making other video for the ecom business that I'm no longer working on. We're making a ton of video over there too.
Yeah. So for interrupting, but this is amazing how much video content you are posting, and also this is the reason how I like how we connected, because I am basically bombarded because of all of the other like connections we share. You are nonstop on my radar. That's why I reached out to talk about this a little bit, because this is I have a feeling this is a great story, and you already unpacked a lot of interesting, like, I don't know, avenues. That there are a couple of avenues, and I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned that you changed the attitude from changed, let's say, strategy from targeting for e-commerce people to a B2B software, right? So more about your own personal story, let's say. Why was that? Was it because you are launching a new product and this was like a preparation of the ground preparation for that new product that is fresh, or was it for retention.com, like, I know, brand awareness, let's say?
Yeah. So there's a very important nuance that I just want to highlight. Our company has not pivoted. Like the business selling into ecom companies is the same as it always was. I'm just working on this new product, and I pivoted my media brand to talk
Exactly.
about
Yeah.
that
This is
product.
what I wanted
Yeah,
to clarify.
exactly. And we're attempting to replace what my media brand was doing over there with basically a show about this guy Kyle, who, you know, our whole sales motion over there is like events, basically, like, you know, like small and medium sized in-person events. And the show's called Events That Don't Suck, because it's like, you know, we're trying to like do something different than trade shows or whatever. And then we're also doing a video effort to like profile all of our our like top tier customers, called The Art of Excellence, that aren't like case studies. It's just like telling the stories of these like it's the stories of like the top Shopify entrepreneurs are incredible, because usually they got there so quickly because they just created the perfect product at the perfect time with a perfect like marketing flywheel or whatever. And it's just unbelievable how much ground was covered, how quickly. So anyway, why did I pivot my media brand? And then why are we doing this other product? Those are the questions, right? So I started off with a ghostwriter because I was very afraid to jump into the pool of social media. I'm not on social media in my personal life. And, you know, I had never done anything organic social media I just never done it. So I read this book, which everybody should read, whether you pursue creating a personal brand for yourself or not. You should read Dave Gerhardt's book, Founder Brand, because it really articulates the argument in favor of doing it. And at its core, it's kind of like most businesses were started for a reason, right? So like the founder story is often the reason that the business started, and compelling businesses can have compelling stories. And there's this other dynamic where, as I said before, like the world is set up for people to connect to social media profiles and hear personal stories and all that stuff. So I would say read that book. So he makes the argument for it. It's very articulate. And he's like, you should just go put 30 minutes a day in your calendar and start tweeting or whatever, right? Or LinkedIn, you know, pick a platform, just start tweeting, right? And like, I'm sitting there reading that and I'm like reflecting, right? Like I started my first company 10 years ago. Who I am now as an entrepreneur and what I'm good at, right? Like the decisions that I will make when, you know, deciding what product to bring to market and how to market it, and the team that I want to work with, and the speed with which it all happens. Like now compared to the first company, because before I started my first company, I was a credit default swap trader. I knew nothing about it. It wasn't like I was in tech sales and like I started a tech company. Like I knew nothing about being an entrepreneur. So like the me today is literally like LeBron James compared to the me who was playing 7th grade basketball 10 years ago. It's a miracle we survived, but like we did, and I'm here. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm not just going to tweet against somebody like me who's been tweeting for 10 years, having no idea what the game is, right?
Exactly. What's the game? How to start?
Yeah, like the people who are crushing Twitter know something that I don't know, and I'm not just going to sit there.
And they are different now versus when they were starting. You know what they are doing now is totally different. What brought their initial following?
Yes, I agree with that. In general, you know, in Twitter, I just use as an example because that's where the Shopify ecosystem was happening a year and a half ago. And I think it still is, but like it was more a year and a half ago. And like there are a couple of companies, like this company called Triple Whale did an incredible job with this like Twitter kind of takeover. And like the founders were tweeting about the problems. Like, what was interesting to me was Triple Whale started after us. We were about the same place from a revenue perspective. We only had done cold email and they only had done organic social media for marketing. And I was like, well, we should both be doing them. We should both trade notes. Like you show me how to do this Twitter thing. I'll show you how to like, you know, do this cold email thing. So I hit him up and I like went over there And I'm explaining to them our cold email strategy and talking about organic social media. And their head of social at the time, his name was Tommy, or is still Tommy, but he's not their head of social. He's like, dude, I think you should just like, LinkedIn has a creator versus consumer imbalance that Twitter doesn't have. Twitter's super competitive. Everybody on Twitter kind of tweets for the most part. Nobody on LinkedIn posts. It's like 1 to 2% of active users, right? So like,
I'm just saying it's obvious when you are saying this. It's so like it's into your face obvious. Like, you know, there's a couple of people who are posting on LinkedIn. Everyone else is reposting their, you know, company company, you know what,
yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
generic stuff, and everyone is congratulating themselves on unimportant stuff.
Right. So while the perfect audience for that ecom play may not have been there, it may have been on Twitter, the opportunity to aggregate a decent audience, it was just so much lower hanging fruit on LinkedIn. And Tommy's like, by the way, I'll write for you, right? So you don't even have to do anything. Like if you don't even want to have idea sessions, like I can just go figure it out. So I was like, okay, that's kind of compelling. So I started working with him, and then I had this weird thing, you know, we're talking about video. So I had this interesting thing happen to me in like 2018. Maybe it's 2017, but I think it was 2018. So meanwhile, my story is like, I have this bootstrap 22 million ARR startup right now that I'm very public about called retention.com, which sells into the ecom companies. I'm starting another business unit. It's under retention.com. It's called Airbnb. It's at 5K MRR, right? So it's like, before retention.com, I had this other company called Robly, which was an email newsletter app in the MailChimp space. Super fucking hard space. Klaviyo, right? Like, people don't realize Klaviyo has made it seem to e-commerce companies like email marketing is not a competitive space. That's how dominant they are. It is unbelievable. And by the way, MailChimp was even more dominant than that. It's just Klaviyo really leaned into the Shopify ecosystem. Then that thing with Shopify MailChimp happened, and like they just won the game after the game had already been won. Email marketing is probably the second oldest SaaS space besides CRM. And there are three like pretty big dominant players, maybe four across different sort of verticals within email marketing. Then there's 200 other vendors who are stuck at 2 or 3 million, which is, it is hyper competitive. With these dominant, it would be like, I like to say, trying to start an email newsletter or marketing automation app is like trying to sell cola against Coke and Pepsi. Like, good luck, you know, like everything that Klaviyo does. If you were trying to start an email newsletter app for e-commerce today, every dollar that Klaviyo spends is going to go 3 times farther than the dollar that you spend. That's sort of the general rule. Like, once it's sort of like, there's like an adage that like once a company gets more than 60% of like a captive audience, you need $3 for every one they spend to get market share from them. They have like almost this, it's not like quite, it's like monopolistic returns in that regard. It's like a defensibility that's like just because of how big they are. So anyway, I was trying to figure out what I could do to grow this thing, and I just couldn't figure anything out because like email marketing is so hard. And my brother, and I don't know, I'm sure a lot of people have been stuck on this podcast because that's been the story of my life. It's just stuck and unstuck and stuck and unstuck. And, you know, retention.com's a little bit stuck right now at this 22 million level. We've been there for 4 months. We'll figure something out. We'll get unstuck. Hopefully this new business will unstick us too. But like, man, I was stuck at 3 million ARR with this other business for years. And when you're stuck, like I'm reaching for anything to like grow. And like when you're stuck, it's kind of like never ask the barber if you need a haircut. Like anyone comes along and they're like, you need to do Facebook ads. I'm like, oh, I do? Like, well, I tried that before. And it didn't work. Like, no, you didn't try them with me. So like these agencies, you know, it's just like, and of course it doesn't work, right? Because like the core problem is a product market fit issue. And like what I believe is once you have word of mouth for something, there are infinity ways that you can speed it up. And the problem is just picking the most efficient ways to speed it up, right? If you do not have word of mouth, meaning you don't have actual product market fit, nothing you do will work. It's just sad, but it's reality, which is like kind of like why this winner take all dynamic happens. So anyway, like my brother had sent me this webinar of this guy named Mitch Harper, who was one of the founders of BigCommerce. And he's like, dude, like, you're an example. Robley's an example of something not to do in this webinar. And the guy was basically making the argument. He's like, I don't know who this company is. They're asking me to sign up for a free trial of their software. It was like his point was like, you need to warm up with content and build trust before you actually make somebody an offer, right? That was his point. I watched his webinar. I'm like, well, this actually sounds pretty smart. I asked my brother, I'm like, do you want to just like buy his $3,000 a year membership and like see what his other courses are? So let's split it. So like we bought it, split it. And then I ended up watching all of his stuff. And what BigCommerce tried to do was just take a slice above Shopify. So I was like, oh, like, well, we're trying to do that in the email space. I need this guy as a business coach. And he was in the info game at the time. It was like, $4,000 for 1 hour a month or some shit like that. Like something crazy it was like, he offered that as his top tier. Here's the point that I'm finally getting at. So like, I finally get a call with this guy after watching 100 hours of his video over like a 2 or 3 week period. And like, I felt like he was my best friend, literally, because I had just spent 100 hours with him the prior 3 weeks. And he was teaching me stuff,
Yeah, he was teaching
looking
you
back
for
on
100 hours.
Yeah, like looking back on it, a lot of it didn't apply to my business, and a lot of info products, I think, are just people very definitively recounting their experience with things that you can't necessarily, but like whatever. Like I had spent a ton of time with this guy, and he's talking to me like we're total strangers, and it was the weirdest I had never had that happen to me before. It was the weirdest feeling ever. And I was like, man, when I have an opportunity to gain this power, it's not now. Because like none of this is like really working, but if and when I have the opportunity to gain this power to my advantage, where I will be operating in a way to where it will just be doing this to people. It will be making people feel like they are my friend, so that when I meet them for the first time, they've watched me for 100 hours, right? I'm doing it. So anyway, the LinkedIn stuff started kind of working, and they were doing a lot of stuff like these engagement pods or whatever. I don't know if you ever heard like you can pay people to like comment and it gets you followers or whatever.
Never heard about this, but interesting.
Yeah, like there's this guy Chase Diamond who's got a company that will do it for you for like $500 a month. So like you post, and then like this 10 people,
hordes of people.
Yeah, 10 people will comment on it, and like you comment on theirs or whatever. So I don't do it anymore, but like it, there's a question about whether there's some bots in this network or like whatever, but it's a good way to get a critical mass of followers. And then a couple months in, I'm like, I actually want to start adding video to this. And so I started doing like one work in public video a week, like not really knowing what I was doing, And then I found a producer who was producing my podcast. He's like, we can help you put these videos out. And then he sent me a suggestion. He's like, here's a YouTuber talking about like what YouTube videos should be. So basically it was like a hook, a story, 3 lessons, and a soft CTA. That was like the format he recommended. So then for the next 6 months, I tried to put out one every day, but I'd record 5 at a time, and then they produced them. I mean, this was really expensive, but I just wanted to see if I could do it, and those days, you can still see them if you scroll back a year in my LinkedIn feed. I stopped doing it last July. But they're like, 2 to 3 minute little lessons that I was experiencing. And I didn't know, I hadn't found a resonance with the audience yet. I didn't know what I was talking about. One week I would talk about like the spiritual elements of business or some shit. One week I would talk about like, how you need to fire people fast. And like, one week I would talk about marketing, whatever. So I was just reaching. And the whole time I was doing it, like I'd go to trade shows and people like 10 people would be like, I watch your videos every day. And they were putting them on Instagram too. So like my wife's friends were getting served them. So I was going to weddings and people were saying the same thing, but I just think it was because it was like a second order connection. But the trade show thing was really interesting, and the issue I had was like, all of a sudden I was like making the videos, and then the ghostwriter was kind of rewriting a half-assed posts to go along with it. And like, I just didn't feel like it was the best version. And I knew something was wrong because I just knew it, right? Like I knew it was wrong because I didn't know what I was doing, if that makes sense. I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing. Right. So then eventually I was reaching for help, and there's this guy. One of the things that got me started on LinkedIn in the first place is I'm in Pavilion, this revenue leader group, and Sam Jacobs did a webinar with his LinkedIn coach, Alec Paul, who's now my LinkedIn coach. So I hit Alec up. I'm like, dude, like I'm like really trying hard at this, and I know something's wrong. I just don't know what it is. Can you help? And he's like, I don't know about the Twitter side, because I was, trying to do some Twitter too. He's like, LinkedIn, I can definitely help. And so for 2 months with Alec, we tried to make perfect text posts, some with video assets, some with not. And the engagement was better, but it was not ultimately leading to booked demos with Shopify founders. Like, kind of another problem we have on the ecom side is like, it's such a thin slice of the market that like we're targeting that like any social platform is hard, Whereas like this B2B side, it's like we have a free offer. Everyone with a website who's not an enterprise company would put it on in 1 second when they heard the value prop. It's like, do you want LinkedIn profiles pushed to Slack in real time for free? It's like, yes, I want that. Click.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Please. So anyway, what was the sort of sequence next was really interesting. So like we were kind of floating the idea of putting this B2B product out in like July or August of last year. And we had some people testing the ecom tech on the B2B side, and they kind of liked it. It like we were sending them a spreadsheet of people's email addresses, consumer email addresses, basically, who were on their site. And they're like, this is pretty cool. Like, I don't know. And then it was kind of like enough to keep digging. We're like, well, if we rebuilt this and instead of resolving it to a consumer email, we resolved it to a LinkedIn profile, that would probably be better. So then we like kind of rebuilt the tech and started sending that spreadsheet to people, and they were more enthusiastic. Like, this is pretty rad. I mean, you're sending me everybody on my site and the LinkedIn and like all that shit. But it still wasn't to where I was like, this is magic yet. Like this, because like when we started retention.com, no one had ever seen anything like it. They were like, what do you mean you can resolve an anonymous website visitor to a deliverable email address? How's that possible? They just had never heard of anything. So the B2B side was a little different because there's a ubiquitous technology that resolves a visitor to a company, just not the person. So you go in and you tell somebody you do this, they're like, well, I already have Clearbit, or like, I already have 6 Sense. Like, I'm already doing this. And you're like, well, you're not, because like, whatever. Like, they give me a context, like, well, they're guessing, So, but it was good enough to where I was like, I was talking to Alec, I was like, dude, so like, we're not booking any demos on the ecom side, but like, what if we did this for B2B? He's like, oh man, with what you're putting out, like, I am 100% confident that this will absolutely crush on the B2B side. So I'm like, okay, let's just do a couple month experiment and start. And this is where I was getting back to the point I was making before. Let's start writing about like my fucking sales drama last year and like, my bootstrapping startups and all that stuff. And I put just that week I had talked to like, I think I put a post out kind of recapping. It was like early August, recapping this thing that happened to us where like we scaled our sales force way too much because we were getting bad data back, basically. Like we were overselling people, and it was like we were sticking people in these deals that they ended up downsizing and churning off of. But like as it was happening in the beginning, it was like, shit, like we need, if this is true, then the TAM is massive and we just need more salespeople going after it. And it was just a nightmare. And like the VP sales quit, and we, instead of replacing him, we like got rid of, 10 out of 15 of our salespeople at once, or 11 out of 16 or something. And it was terrible. But then it started like speeding up again because the environment got so much better in the company or whatever. Everybody knew that it was like a sinking ship at the time. So I put a post out about that. And then a bunch of people started hitting me up about like this BDR thing, because BDR got a lot harder last year. And they're just like, dude, like, I don't know what, I don't know if these guys are doing anything, like not that they're not working, but like, like the cold email doesn't work, right? Like it's the response rates are just like so low compared to what they used to. So I put this post out that was like, I spoke to 10 BDR leaders last week, and here's the 8 surprising and controversial things that they all said. And it's like stuff that basically it's like, you're either thinking about getting rid of these guys or you already did. That was some of the posts, right? And it just crushed in a way that like I'd never seen a post crush on LinkedIn. And then I'm like, holy shit. And then, I kind of thought I knew why, because I could feel it as I was writing it. I'm like, this is like a sensitivity that I know that I have, that everyone's talking to me about, that everyone is afraid to say, right?
Exactly.
Like,
and LinkedIn is full of BDRs now.
Yeah, it's like you're afraid to admit it to yourself that like you got to get rid of these guys, right? Like, so then I wrote 3 more posts that weekend, and it was like over Labor Day when I was in Santa Fe. And I remember I was like, I got to write some LinkedIn posts. It was 5:30. I'm like, I'm going to go drink some at night. I'm like, I'm going to go drink some coffee. Let's have dinner at 8 with my wife and my friends who were in this rental in Santa Fe that we were like escaping the heat of Texas. And I came back and I was like, oh man, I think I just wrote 3 fucking killer posts. And I was like, if these crush, then I know what I'm doing. If they do not, then I don't. Right. And like each one of them, epic. And then after that, I was like, okay, like I know.
I have now blueprint.
Well, yeah, it was like, I know what I'm doing now. Like this whole feeling of being lost, right? Like not even being able to articulate what was wrong with it. But like there's some big themes, right? Like I knew that I wasn't the person to talk about the ecom guys. And like I also didn't know why I was doing what I was doing, right? Like now, dude, like I'm telling you, like I know exactly what to write to have thousands of people who are founders engage with my post. I know what to write to have thousands of salespeople engage. I know what to write to have thousands of high-level marketers engage. And I have these 3 audiences, which are all ICP for this new product. And like, it's literally a point where it's like, well, we haven't like hit the founder audience in a while. Like we need to write one of these posts that's like, oh, I went from 0 to 1 million 2 times. And like, I'm doing it the 3rd time now. Here are the 5 pieces of advice I'd give to somebody starting out, whatever. Right. Like there's just topics and posts, like how amazing is that but by the way, like it took a year, like it literally took 12 months.
Which is not much, in fact, because, and this is super interesting. I wasn't expecting, diverting into, LinkedIn influencer story, but this is like, I am captivated. And also, I have a feeling you spent a lot of time, from the beginning, learning the ropes, finding your, your style that makes an impact. How much time initially it took with all of the videos, podcasts, and so on? So, I was saying about media company for a reason. There is at least one podcast, right? You posted videos you have written on LinkedIn. So how much in total? You are head of company, and I have a feeling half of your job is, being out on LinkedIn now.
Yeah, I actually think, I mean, it's at least half. It's not where I spend half my time, but with especially this role I have now, like it was really effective from bringing a year ago, from bringing us to 0 awareness in the ecosystem to like people were very aware of us in the ecosystem. But with what I'm doing now, it's actually driving business and building community in the ideal customer profile. And no one else can do it, right? Like it's like we're adding Santosh, who's posting twice a week now, and we're going to add this guy Pete, because we're trying to like build it's a freemium we're trying to make it freemium 100% self-serve. So we're trying to do chatbots, AI chatbots instead of people as we scale, because I think that like the world wants that story. It wants to see the first like unicorn that like did it with with AI or whatever. So I mean, I'll tell you what I do now, I'll tell you what I did then in terms of time. but like I'm just looking for ways to go even deeper, right? So every week I do a 1 hour strategy call with the consultant, me and Santosh, talking about ideas and basically like what has hit the last couple weeks, what has been happening in the business that could make its way into a good post. Like a great example is like I had a conversation with the founder of this company called Clay, which is like a sales enablement tech. Really, but in PLG, they have no salespeople. They have 35 people. They're a few years in. They're doing really well. My plan was to right now try to emulate this company called Jolie, which is a shower head on the D2C side. This guy, Ryan Babenzian, is an unbelievable entrepreneur. And with 3 people, he basically got to 50 million run rate revenue in 18 months, doing basically through a UGC motion, like very mechanically calling out not micro, but like small influencers, sending them a shower head. And he got 20,000 pieces of UGC made last year. Unbelievable. So I wanted to emulate that. And I wanted to also be very, with the free offer, I'm like, oh, it's like community is an important part of like a freemium play or whatever. So I wanted to get a community space and like have a bunch of content going in there. And, like right now with this new tool, we're not even trying, and like, 50 to 200 people sign up every day for the free version. Like it's crazy, and it's just, I'm posting on LinkedIn the same as I always would, but like all of a sudden we have a place to send them, and like, with no additional effort, we're actually trying to not get people to sign up. It's just happening, right? So top of funnel is like incredible. And I'm talking to this guy and I'm telling him all this stuff. And I'm like, well, what do you think about this community idea? He's like, well, how do you think? He's like, these communities that are built around ideas there's competition out there, and the people you're competing with do this full time. So like, I don't like that part of it. And he's like, if it's content led, how do you envision people will engage with it? I'm like, I think they'll just show up and binge it and then kind of leave. He's like, well, that doesn't sound like it's killer, right? He's like, your LinkedIn is like better than anybody's right now. And it's building community in the comments. He's like, I would do that. And then he's like, they've started on this UGC motion. They call it Clay Creators. He's like, dude, like, don't do that yet. He's like, you definitely don't have a problem acquiring people. He's like, just spend all your time figuring out free to paid conversion. Like, pick out this like top slice of your users, tell them the features you're going to deliver in 2 weeks and get them to agree to pay for it. When they start paying, check in a month later, make sure they're happy. Spend all your time doing that. And then once you feel very comfortable that you understand your free to paid motion, then start doing this UGC stuff. You got a tiny team. Like, I would only be focusing on this 2 killer, because like the product is killer, right? It's just, we have no idea what our business model is yet. So I'm talking to Alec about it. And he's like, well, that's a great post. It's like, I had a 5-minute conversation last, I just got off the phone or whatever. It's like, I had a 5-minute conversation that completely changed the trajectory of my next 6 months, right? Like, that's a great hook coming from me, right? Who posts this work in public stuff. So that's an example of what we talk about in the idea generation. It's like, what's happened during the week that can like make its way into a post, Then there's a 30-minute call later, and this is on Monday. There's a 30-minute call later in the day on Monday that's all about outreach in LinkedIn. So like, it's not cold outreach, but it's like taking the connection, like if you put out a big LinkedIn post that gets thousands of likes, you'll get 200 people who inbound connect to you. So sifting through inbound connections for ideal customer profile. And we're still trying to put Santosh and Pete on the phone with everybody. So basically like talking about how that machine is working and any changes in that machine is like another 30 minutes. Then I write 3 to 4 posts a week. In the worst case scenario, the first one takes like an hour and it's brutal. And like, I can bang the next 2 out in another hour. In the best case scenario, it's like, an hour 15, an hour and a half for all 3 to 4. And then Alec edits those and posts them. He's got his schedule, he's got a content calendar basically. and then we make videos for half of them. And like, Christy will like, who's the head of video, she'll like put time in my calendar to like record. In a half hour, we can basically do the video bits for both of them. So, and then by the way, that's just I would call it my outbound content engine. I'm also trying to get on as many podcasts as humanly possible, because now I have enough LinkedIn clout where people actually want me, which is great. It's weird. It's like you get to a certain point. Like somebody, Eminem or something, said this. He's like, all of a sudden I'm rich and I'm getting free clothes. Like it's kind of like that. It's like once it's already working for you, then like you can do stuff like that. It's like, well, I want to get on all the sales and marketing podcasts, and people actually want to have you on. So I think there's the outbound content engine for me is LinkedIn and this video stuff. But then I also want to get in front of everybody else's audiences. And this is the most important thing that I'm doing, because it is an unbelievable amount of effort. But now that it's gotten to this point, and by the way, we keep getting better at it, it is literally the most, for this market we're going after, it is the most efficient way to spread awareness and acquire these free users that could ever exist.
Yeah,
ever.
You're
right?
like learning. You're also like learning machine, right? Because you started 12 months ago, and now you have this amount of followers. But also, I think the key is also in the content. You mentioned that during this conversation. That
oh my god!
well,
that's all. That's a whole thing, right? Because like that's
exactly
what gets distribution. It's like you got to feed the machine what it wants.
And people want you. Sorry for interrupting, but people want you because of that content, right? What you are saying now is also based, that building public story. Also is like, for me, it's super interesting. Also for for one more reason, it is, I think, like third time this week I was hit with post on LinkedIn, a couple of times, because no one is posting on LinkedIn, and we are as Osom Studio, we are also in B2B space, building websites for tech companies, but I'm dragging my feet to do this. And I had 2 great posts that were saying you have to do this, right, to have that minimum recognition, right? And I just hate to do this.
Yeah.
And you are my third input that is saying the same thing, right? So I'm just there's no, my team members will laugh at me that Maciej, you can't escape now. You have to do this.
Yeah,
How many times can we say this? And one more thing, we were talking like 3.5 years ago with a business consultant, Greg Albrecht. Hi, Greg, out there, and he was saying that 3 years ago, guys, you have to start building your personal brands on LinkedIn, start posting stuff, stuff other people don't, and you have to do this. Now with this podcast, I have for a year, about a year now, I'm not doing anything on LinkedIn. And this is like I mean, I don't know if it is final call for me to start doing something about this. So
you can get somebody to write for you in the beginning, and then if you give it 90 days or something and you just start like, this is fucking useless, then you just stop, right? Like, the other extreme is what happened to me. You're like, I see the potential in this, but I'm going about it in the wrong way. Let me figure out how to do this in a way where it will be incredible, right? But like, I want to reiterate, I think entrepreneurs can be obsessive by nature. Like, this was what I was trying to figure out last year, right? Like so much of my energy was going towards trying to crack this. And our go-to-market strategy for this B2B product is a result of cracking it. Like, so the nature of the product on the ecom side, which we can talk about very soon, it's a high churn product to a high churn buyer persona. It's like when you're selling a software as a service that effectively sells leads, that is known as infamously the highest churn product. We have competitors now. We didn't a year ago. So like they're taking some people when their contracts run out. And there's this other issue where Shopify's SMB, so like small businesses higher churn, the mid-market, like whatever. So initially I was like, I'm going to try to start the B2B product with a lower churn buyer persona. I'm going to start in lower mid-market. And the only reason I'm going to be able to do that is because I have this great LinkedIn brand with these people. Because like when you start a startup, typically you have to start at the bottom because you have no fucking brand. And then like you fight your way up, get bigger and bigger deals because that's how SaaS works. The megaphone was so powerful that I was like, man, I just need something for free to give to people. You know? And like if we can make it truly self-serve, we could probably convert an unbelievably small percentage of these people to $500 a month, and it would still be a great business. So it's interesting how, you know, the two things are kind of influencing each other, right? Like the fact that we had a B2B product that we were messing around with is the reason that I started writing to revenue leaders on LinkedIn. Then that crushed so hard that it sort of defined what the go-to-market motion was. You know, I would have definitely done it the other way had I not had this unbelievable megaphone, right? Like just because you make money faster and like whatever, but like, you know, freemium is like the global domination thing. So anyway, I don't know what my point was there, but there were several points. Like number one, like I just became crazy obsessed with figuring it out. And then number two, you know, we're all part of these very connected systems. You know, like every business is very different. What's going to work for me isn't going to work for you. And my journey the last year has been one of these things, you know, it's like it's all influencing everything else. And right now it's so powerful that it's all one thing is helping the other thing, you know?
Yeah, and since this is taking so much of your time, how are you building those businesses? You know, you have a couple of co-founders. You have, but you're not a big you're not a big organization, right? You're tiny.
I have like I started Get Emails, which is now retention.com. That's what it was called at first, with 6 people. 5 of them still work here, which is crazy. That team, one of the co-founders of that is, her name's Diana Ross. She now is like managing that ecom business that she is doing the job that I was doing before. She effectively is running that company. That's not her title. Her
CEO
title
of that unit.
Yeah, her title's CRO, but she is the CEO of that business. Major stuff she still asks me about, you know, big initiatives like we're trying to install this like process framework called EOS right now. So like that was my idea, you know, but like the day-to-day, I'm not involved in that at all anymore. But there's 55 people who work on it full time.
Oh,
yeah. 22 million ARR, 55 people. It's like 30% total margin business. It's great. It's we'll see how much it grows this year. That's the only issue. Then I have a team of 5 full-time that's working on this new business. Me, this guy Santosh, who's my COO, who's like is this big B2B data guy who built ZoomInfo and Apollo and stuff. Tate, our CTO, stuff like this, like building a V1. No one is faster or better in the world than him. And we have a guy who's like basically doing support with the goal of creating self-serve documentation to solve every problem. And then we have a guy who's doing kind of chatbot sales and marketing and support layer on top of all of that. So those are the 5. And I think we can get away with that 5 for like a really long time. Like I had the original 6. We had to let one of the guys go, but we replaced him. So we were 6 people at Get Emails until September of 22, 12 million ARR. So I think we can my goal is to get our B2B way farther with this. Maybe we need to hire somebody to like, if we really get it into the UGC, maybe we need to like hire somebody to like manage influencers and like try to get our users posting about it and like all that shit. But Other than that, I don't know why we would need any other people. So
yeah, this is amazing, because I was expecting even less people, like having a rough look on the on LinkedIn, and I was like 30 people, but 55 is still small number for a organization like yours. And I have a question about those chatbots, because for sales there is like, from what I observe from the outskirts, or from the, let's say, sidelines of AI growing as a whole, like technology and industry, is number one chatbots, then for sales, like outreach and stuff, and content obviously is the biggest part. How are you doing this chatbot thing for that tool?
so this is an interesting conversation in itself. I don't use ChatGPT at all in the content that I create. And here's my view about it. I think, so I'm going to rip off something. I listen to this podcast with this guy, Rick Rubin, who's this famous music producer. He wrote a book called The Creative Act. You should check it out if you haven't read it. So good. I think this content is art, personally. It's like, this is the art that I'm putting out in the world. It happens to also be marketing.
I agree.
I agree. But like, this is creative work. It's art. You're having to satisfy a lot of the things that an artist would have to satisfy when you're making it. So, Rick Rubin, when he was interviewing this guy, I forget who it was, he's like, I believe that the most interesting thing about art to me is the perspective of the artist. And he's like, it's not clear to me that AI has perspective. So I think that people see the tool and they see what it does, and they're like, this is written elegantly. It's written beautifully. It maybe even is written how I would write it, right? But what it's missing is, and I think the reason that my post resonates so much is like, well, this is my experience, And I think you could probably prompt it, but it's still, I guess what I'm saying is like, I don't think that AI has nailed, maybe I'll take it back, but like, I'm trying to do things that are like maximizing authenticity in this world where so much more ChatGPT created content will be put out there over every channel, not just the channel that I'm on, right? Everybody's using it for blog posts. I find this stuff hard to read. I mean, I can tell, I think that I can tell when people like comment using the AI magic wand on my stuff and I write AI ? Back, because I'm like, that it's just something about, there's just something about, and I'm sure I get fooled, half the time, 3/4 of the time, whatever. But like, and I have a buddy named Chase Diamond who's kind of more of a content factory. Like he says, I'm trying to be known well, whereas he's trying to be well known. If that makes sense. He's bigger on Twitter, and like he can put tweets out that are basically ChatGPT generated, but it's stuff like, what are the 5 important things of a subject line of an email, right? That's not the kind of posts I'm putting out. I'm putting out like, exactly. What I talked about you earlier. It's like, I talked to this guy who was running a PLG company, and it totally changed my priorities, right? I don't know how you're going to get that out of an AI.
You won't.
Yeah, exactly. So my view is, I'm trying to maximize authenticity in this content creation thing at the top of the funnel, and not have AI have anything to do with it.
I get it, but you also escaped a little bit that question about chatbot for the
yeah no I'm getting there.
Okay,
so
all right.
I'm trying to have the sales, customer support, and customer success, or whatever you want to call it, be entirely chatbot AI, right? And so like, and that's just like a governing principle we're striving for. You could have a lot of salespeople working on this, surely, put them on calls a bunch. We're just going to try to use chatbots instead of people to solve all those questions, and not have a fallback layer where it goes to human. Week 1, so like, I mean, we're not even 2 weeks into this. Week 1, we had 1,200 support requests. 95.5% were resolved self-serve entirely.
But based on that chatbot?
Yes.
Great.
2.5% went immediately to a human, and 2.5% went to a human eventually.
Second line.
So like we want to just take that 5% that's left and make it like as close to zero as possible, and then just tell the story they're using chatbots. So the whole long drawn out speech I gave there was like, the most obvious use case of this ChatGPT is just to write long form text. The problem is that is what everyone's using it for. So I think it's like creating like a dilution in that, right? Like it's making the actual thought leadership that's max authentic resonate even more. So like my whole point is like, I think that the best use of this is actually the customer support use case and maybe like some sales or something, you know?
And I was referring to that because those are three main like paths the industry is finding immediate applications, but also CEO of Klarna also recently, like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, posted that amazing summary of their investment into exactly the same tool, chatbots. And funnily enough, I had one more conversation a week ago with a guy who hates, it's a prospective client, but part of the discussion was that he hates FAQ sections. There are no interesting questions there, and his business relies also on huge documents, like there are 80, 100 pages, legal text documents. No one can read it. Clients certainly not. His salespeople, they're struggling. So you can create a tool that would reply to clients' questions based on that huge, unreadable data,
Totally.
like knowledge base.
I
and
love
this is
that
a perfect
use case.
application.
Yeah, I love that use case. I think that a lot of people are trying to use it to make organic thought leadership or organic social media thought leadership content. And I don't like that use case. I just don't think it makes good stuff for that,
And do you have already that filter that tells every image which was AI generated, and also most of the copy like text that is like screaming this was written in AI?
Do I have
When you
in my mind,
like
or like
in your mind, like you look at it and you immediately know this is AI?
So I try to answer most of the comments that people leave on my posts, and that's where I feel like I can see it the most. It's
All
just
right. Yeah, this is easiest part.
It's like, because it's just like a recap of the post ish. It's written perfectly, and it's like, why would someone ever make a comment that just recaps my post and tells me good job? You know what I mean? Like that's not a. And it's weird how it annoys you. It's like I feel like I wasted my time. It's like, here's the feeling that I get. If you weren't willing to take the time to write me a genuine comment, it wasn't worth my time reading it. So kind of like, fuck you,
Yeah, and Peter Levels is also was also he's like famous building public person on Twitter, digital nomadism and stuff, and he was so furious about those AI generated replies to his posts that he was like screenshotting them and asking AI and so on, because this is so ubiquitous on his profile.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's like, I'm taking the time. Can you just please, like, but then again, it's like people want the maximum return for the least amount of effort. So like, I'm on people's list now to go comment on posts because I have 70,000 followers and good engagement. So people will just do that. It's like, oh, Adam Robinson, click, 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 click,
Exactly.
I get it.
All right. So I think, we spent an hour discussing LinkedIn strategy, which was totally not planned, but I'm hooked. I'm hooked. And, I have to have a very honest discussion about this with my team.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is the place to start is getting a ghostwriter and just seeing if you even see anything come back. I think you probably will, but
yeah.
anyway.
Now, do we dive into cart abandonment recovery for like 10-15 minutes? It was meant to be a deep dive, whereas
Right.
it was deep dive into LinkedIn
Yeah.
strategy.
Well, I
So
think
let's
most
start
people
with,
are more
yeah.
intrigued by, because people are doing it on the ecom side too. Not necessarily LinkedIn, but like, I mean, the Dude Wipes guy is on LinkedIn, but the founder brand thing works. So it's just novel. Anyway, let's talk about cart abandonment. What specifically do you want to talk about cart abandonment?
I was thinking like, let's start very shallow and then dig a little bit deeper. So, for those who don't even know what's cart abandonment recovery, can we start with this, why this is important, and then how it is done and for who it makes sense and for who doesn't.
Yep. Got it. So we're mainly talking about e-commerce stores, at least the world that I have come from, that are like the largest consumers of this cart abandonment sort of technology, if you want to call it that. And the core idea is this. The hottest lead in the world to you as an e-com store owner is somebody who has put something in their cart, and then like their 2-year-old has come over and required their attention, and they shut their laptop and they leave and they go play with their 2-year-old.
How
And
well
then,
do I know it?
yeah. And then like it has slipped your mind that you ever put this thing in the cart, right? The problem is if you do not reach out to that person and contact them again, the odds that they will convert on that cart are surprisingly low. If you do reach out to them over email, SMS, whatever channel is available to you, the odds that they will convert on that cart are much higher. And everyone sees this everywhere. If you're new to realizing that this idea is a thing, Amazon immediately comes to people's minds. It's like, oh yeah, like when I put stuff in an Amazon cart and I don't buy it, Amazon emails me and tries to get me to buy it again. So that it's called an abandoned cart or an add to cart flow or something like that. And a flow is Klaviyo parlance for a series of emails that is triggered by some action. And in this case, that action would be adding something to the cart. So I think that sums up the problem, right? In the solution, quite frankly. So it's like, and the interesting thing, there's probably a lot of Klaviyo users listening to this. The interesting thing about Klaviyo is that, and this is really annoying, when you create a Klaviyo account, they require that you set up something they call an abandoned cart flow. But what that really is an abandoned checkout. So the flow they require you to set up does not get triggered until you actually get past the cart page to the checkout page and leave in the middle of that process. So
Why is that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Why don't they call it abandoned checkout? Like that would make everyone's lives so much easier because like we have to sit there and explain to people, well, they're like, well, I have an abandoned cart. It's like, well, you don't. You have an abandoned checkout flow. And like you need, Klaviyo calls what we're talking about add to cart. It's triggered by an add to cart event. That's why they call it that. So a really good question to ask yourself if you're using Klaviyo is, have I set up a flow on my own that does this? And if the answer is no, drop everything. It won't take you 15 minutes. Set it up, Google it. Like there are, rivers of ink have been spilled about how to set up an add to cart flow in Klaviyo. So that would be number one, lowest hanging fruit, period, exclamation point. It's the most valuable email you can send. So yeah, that's an interesting tidbit about it. If you're new to the game, you might not even be doing this, even though you think you are. Pro tip. So what problems can emerge? So anyway, we have a product that basically expands the audience of people that get sent these abandoned carts. Why and how? Well, the fundamental issue is if you own an e-commerce store these days, people are not logging into your e-commerce store most of the time, unless you're Amazon. What are you logged into, right? You're not logged into like jimmyssocks.com, right? You're just not.
Uh,
And the problem is,
and you don't buy with creating an account, but rather as a guest most of the time.
exactly. And if you have that, like the issue there is there's no way for Klaviyo or Shopify to know who the customer on your site is unless they're what's called authenticated or like logged in, right? Or unless they had been logged in, the first party cookie got laid on them and it's still, but it would show that you're logged in. So this is the problem that we solve with our identity tech. I explained that we identify anonymous website visitors. Like, email list growth, abandoned cart, audience expansion. These are the two things we're doing more than anything else. Two biggest value props we have. So yeah, I mean, that, basically if you're like, okay, I'm down, I set up this add to cart, like how do I make it better? How do I make it do more for me? There would be two ways. One would be you would massage the creative, experiment with so you could test this. Generally speaking, I think people try to like the first email goes out. Maybe it doesn't have a discount coupon. Maybe it does. It depends on where maybe you get away without it on the first one. And then the second one, it's got like, there's definitely a discount a discount coupon best practice at some point in this flow, whether it's 2 or 3 parts. Like the last email definitely has it. It's just a question of whether all of them do or not. And that's like the fundamental ingredient of it's the thing that can really change the conversion the most, and then it's this audience expansion stuff. It's just like, but then the question becomes, okay, with the audience expansion, the coupon thing kind of applies to everybody, the discount. With the audience expansion, it's like, at what point is enough flow going through your abandoned cart series to make it worth trying to amplify that with technology? If there's zero, the answer is don't waste your time, right? If it's $500 a month, the answer is don't waste your time, right? I think you need to be recapturing thousands of dollars a month through this flow before it even makes sense to start trying to use this identity technology to make it better. Because it's like one of these things, it's like, if you're not there yet, like you have a lot of other things in your business to work on speeding up before this. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, this was kind of one of the problems with my content creation effort up until I started talking to B2B. It's like, man, this is my area of expertise, but there's just not that much to it. You know what I mean? It's a pretty simple thing. It's like a binary. Do you have it set up? Yes or no? Then like a binary, are you using best practices with the copy and everything? Yes or no? And then it's like, do you have enough flow going through to use identity technology to expand the audience? Yes or no? And then that's it. And then the only other thing would be, that the abandoned cart is the most effective of these flows. You should also definitely have abandoned product flows set up in an ideal world. So like the way I think about email is there's like, you're blasting out newsletters every so often, right? A much better email is something that is highly targeted and the timing is perfect. And so like in an ideal world, but you have to have people on your site to do that. So I think the newsletter pulls people to your site, but then once they get to your site, you want to have as much of this sort of like, an abandoned product email is like someone hit your product page, they didn't put something in their cart, they left. You should send them an email with that product and just remind them they were looking at it. It doesn't convert as well as the abandoned cart, but it converts 5 times better than any other email you'll send to somebody. just because it's so personalized and it's so timely, and relevant, right? Which is like the ingredient to good email. So best practices are like, make sure you have the abandoned checkout, the abandoned cart or add to cart, and the abandoned product setup. Some people even have the abandoned site, right?
All right.
So
how do you find that perfect timing?
well, I
What is
mean,
perfect timing?
Klaviyo will like kind of do that for you. So the way all these flows are set up, they kind of track the user around the site, and then whenever that stops, however far they got, that will determine what gets sent. So it's like, maybe they wait 15 minutes until they stop getting signals or whatever, and then that triggers the email or something like that. So it's not, which is a good question, because when you're listening to me, you're like, well, if someone's navigating around my website, wouldn't they just constantly be getting emails that whole journey? It's like, no, you get sent. Klaviyo has this thing called Smart Send also, where it's one email per 24 hours. Almost everybody in my experience has that enabled. I think they enable it by default. So do not worry about people getting over emailed as a result of you setting up a bunch of email flows. That would be my recommendation. More is better with flows. You want to be sending out more of these than less. Like they just convert so well,
But there is also probably an inflection point where you get fed up with all of the communication. No.
Well, if you have Smart Send on,
unsubscribe.
one email per day these days will not. My experience is it doesn't. I've heard no one say that there's like a sort of blowback from over emailing with one every 24 hours.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
And retention.com is exclusively for Shopify, correct?
No. So like we started with Shopify because it was just the biggest ecosystem, we are making an effort to move outside of the Shopify ecosystem, but like kind of above. So like BigCommerce and like, Salesforce.
More enterprisey.
Ish, mid-marketing, omnichannel retailers or whatever. We have found that under around 3 million in revenue for the store, technology like ours doesn't provide enough lift to make it worth the headache of installation and the price, basically. So,
all right.
So yeah, we're trying to segment, which is another thing that makes it challenging from a lot of perspectives. It's like the audience is just a very thin slice. So we need to do this highly targeted account-based marketing to get people to events where we can meet them, and then that's basically the sales motion.
Yeah, you opened another can, let's say, about the events I read on your feed. By the way, do you have 10 more minutes?
Yep, I do.
Yeah. So would you tell us a little bit more about participation in all of those trade shows in last year versus doing this on an exclusive approach?
So we're still going to the trade shows. I think it's like necessary. I think a big mistake that I made was trying to do these big branding plays as an unknown company at the trade shows. Like I was sponsoring the lanyards and the hotel keys and signage everywhere. It's like all that I think was a total waste of money as a no-name company. Now we're trying to like get there with as little expense as possible, and then like do satellite events where we'll like do either dinners or like take a bunch of brands to like drive Lamborghinis or something. You know what I mean? Like the trade show is more of the magnet that pulls audience there, and then we're very tactically trying to find the right people to get to these other events off of we have a key account list of like 1,300 brands we're trying to get in front of. So the activation is really on those 1,300. And the spend has gone from big spend at the trade show to as little as possible at the trade show, and then trying to be smart about these smaller events. basically.
I love the
That's a
satellite.
summary of the strategy, you know.
All right. Yeah, I love the satellite event idea, because it's like, it's a honeypot. The big trade show is the honeypot, and I have a feeling a lot of companies are doing those satellite events, like breakfast for clients. But those Lamborghinis, events, I have never heard about, this kind, like this level of, having fun with your potential clients. That,
I mean,
it's like
that
one person,
is
right?
readily available in Vegas. So if you ever, it's not even that expensive. So yeah, it's pretty easy to execute there. I think it'd be hard to do anywhere else, but they just have that as like a thing. It's like a prepackaged experience, and you just kind of work with them. And yeah.
All right, Adam, thank you very much. It was, I don't know, it was amazing. I'm blown away about all of the stuff that I have heard.
I'm glad.
This was great. This was great. Thank you very much. Good luck with growing the company and the second product. And yeah.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
If you like what you've just heard, don't forget to subscribe for more episodes. On the other hand, if you've got a question we haven't answered yet, feel free to reach out to us directly. Just go to osomstudio.com/contact. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next episode of the Awesome to Know podcast.